Have you seen Usher's found pride of place behind me?
Oh my god.
Usher is now watching. I'm gonna try to throw as many Easter eggs.
Okay. Shall we do the intro?
And then I've got a new drum. Do you see my new drum?
Oh, nice. Yeah. With Horns of Odin on it.
Yeah, it's.
Oh my god.
It's the guy who made a few for the website.
Cool.
He made that one as well. I have no idea how to use it. I just just hit it and it makes a noise.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing with drums.
It does something. It doesn't sound too good, but it does something.
Am I right in presuming that today you are the guest, right, Daniel? That's the whole thing.
That's how we're gonna try it and see.
It's cool.
See what happens.
I like it.
You're me.
Please attempt to do a Dan accent when you do the intro.
Okay, that's okay. All right. Okay.
We're going straight into it.
Let's go straight into it.
I feel like this is going to be a theme.
Okay. Let me. Hello and welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. My name is Daniel Farrand, and today we have a very special guest, namely me. And I've enlisted Jonas Lorentzen to do my voice for me today, because we can't have a Nordic Mythology podcast without Daniel Farrand as the co-host. So he doesn't really know how to do it, so he's kind of just doing a generic northern accent with a bit of Sean Bean, Tyson Fury, and of course the fan favorite Jon Snow mixed in there, and with a bit of hoarseness for a dramatic effect. But today the guest of the show is me, and so for sentimental effect and to relieve him of his fatherly duties, I am again joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordic, who is going to introduce the guest.
Well, today we're joined by Daniel Farrand, the co-owner of the company of the Horns of Odin. Welcome to the show, Dan, and also, of course, co-host of this podcast when he's not the guest. Yeah, welcome to the show, man.
I mean, you'd think that we just couldn't get a guest for this week, wouldn't you?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
I mean, thank you very much for having me, I guess.
Thank you for joining us.
I mean,
thank you for inviting me as co-host. It's the first time I've ever done that, so it's gonna be fun.
I know. I mean, you make so many appearances kind of on the Patreon side of things now that we have to get you on the main show as well, more.
We also generally refer to him in various contexts.
Mm-hmm.
I feel honored. Yeah, no, we will do one when the Neballa video is out. I can break now, unfortunately, and these things just happen every once in a while. We were supposed to have released the Neballa video on the 1st of April, but due to something with the production house, blah 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 blah, we have to move the whole thing 1 month. So the first video is going to be out the 29th of April. So I'll join you guys afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Looking forward to that.
There we go. I mean, that stuff always happens. We've had to move our clothing release back because COVID still seems to be affecting things.
Yeah, that's exactly
else
it.
That's going on in the world, and it's just impossible to plan things. And it becomes a big pain in the ass as well, because we've got like half a clothing release sat in the unit, but I don't want to release it because I want to do the whole thing all together. But it's a bunch of money sat there, also just not doing absolutely nothing. It's just sat there waiting for some time when I can release it.
I've put off cutting my beard for 3 months up until today.
Oh, there you go. Have you cut it today?
Awkward silence.
Yeah, but yeah, you have. I see. It's very neat. It is very neat.
Thank you. Yes.
Very stylish.
Yes.
Yeah, no, Daniel. No, Daniel. It's exactly the same thing that happened, kind of. I mean, because we could have stuck to the release and just done the digital release, which was already ready and everything had been done for that. But if you don't do the two things together, you have like a half a release, and then when you do the physical release later, for some reason it kind of just goes over people's heads, and it just becomes messy and so on. So we had to move the whole thing, but is what it is. Gotta deal with it. It's the times we live in, and I think it also had something to do with some COVID stuff and productions moving around. And
Wait, you guys still have COVID?
no, but it seems to be like it's like the after. What do you call it? Like the aftermath, but not really the. I was thinking about after effects. I was thinking about that kind of thing that happens when a wave rolls back. Efterdønninger.
Yeah.
I think for most part, what it is that everything shut down production, and then everybody sold all the stock that they had stocked in the warehouse, kind of just back stock. So things kept moving, but then now that things have opened back up again, people are still buying things and wanting things, but they just haven't had the production running long enough to refill the back stock. So everything is just.
I thought that was last year, but
that's still
over here.
But that's still going on. That's still going on now. I think they're still trying to get caught up. But then I think even though in the UK now, you don't have to self-isolate or kind of quarantine anymore if you have it. But I think a lot of people still are, and it's just knocking on to businesses, people being off.
Honestly, we have a fuck ton of COVID here, but we just stopped talking about it. We're like very busy talking about the Ukraine war instead.
Oh, that's pretty much what's happened here as well.
Yeah.
So
everybody's an expert on that instead.
That is unfortunately something we probably will be talking about a lot when I reprise for the Neballa stuff, because the whole video and everything was shot in Ukraine.
Yeah. I was going to say
before all this shit happened. Yeah, and I played the gig there together with Shell, and Shell and I. It's a long story, and since you're the guest today, Dan, we can't get into it, but it's quite a wild one. You
can tell if you want,
and
you tell if you want to tell. If you don't feel pressured. But I do remember you were meant to join us one time, but you were stuck in Ukraine, so we had to push that episode. So I do remember.
Yeah,
you
that's
being
right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I thought I could do it. I remember I knew I was going to be in Ukraine, but I thought I could probably do it. But because Ukraine is, I also making film and so on, so things always change, and all that stuff. And Ukraine is just a crazy place to work in, because it is still quite a developing country, and in some ways at least, even though it's at the same time super modern and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's just that you have to be quite good at thinking on your feet sometimes. You go like, fuck, this thing happened that I thought was going to happen, so you have to like. So yeah, so I didn't have time to get on, but I actually developed a really close relationship to a lot of people down there, and yeah, this whole thing has affected me personally a lot, actually, and affected all of us who work with them down there and so on. And yeah, I can say one thing, which is kind of, both horrible and awesome and awe-inspiring. I'd say awesome in the true sense of the word. The production company that we worked with down there, which are just amazing people. They're just all just so fucking incredible. They changed their film and TV production company from being a film and TV production company to being a press company and a humanitarian aid company. So now I mean, they're not making any money, of course, but what they're doing is that they're going around with French and German and English and all sorts of journalists and going around to the different hotspots and documenting what's going on. And I'm on a group with them where I literally get like pictures and information directly from what's going on down there. And so they just changed their whole lives upside down and went from being people who are just doing creative, amazing work to being people who are literally putting themselves in really, really dangerous positions, trying to document what's going on while providing humanitarian aid and just doing, I mean, when I hear about what they're doing there, I was like, whoa, I can't imagine what it must be like. It's just absolutely mad. So yeah, we're working on a video at the moment. Me and the guys who also did the Neballa video, we're trying to work on a video with the footage from the behind the scenes from when we were doing the video and so on, to show a company that is doing creative work, like just in their everyday life. And then we're going to get footage from what they're doing now as well. So just showing a video of like, this was like that, and then boom, one day to another, completely new reality. And so on. And we're going to try to do kind of a fundraising campaign for the work that they're doing down there. And we hope you all will support it with whatever you can once it's out. We're working on it at the moment.
Of course.
So that was my little Ukraine story for now, and I'll tell more of the fun stuff when we do the Neballa episode.
Yeah, I'm sure I mean, the whole thing's just absolutely insane, but let's try not to get too political, I guess, because we'll always upset someone, I think, no matter what.
How the fuck is it political to say, fuck that war?
I completely agree. But there still seems to be people that want to argue for it. I
that's
guess.
Fine.
I think not so. With some people, it's not even that they want to argue for it; they just want to somehow demean Ukraine. Or although people have this weird thing of just wanting to take the opposite stance in a situation like this, just for
they're called
whatever reason,
edgelords.
Yeah,
that's what they are. You know,
trolls.
It's these dudes who think that it's like really cool to be contrarian and really cool to be cynical about things and really cool to be either like really far left or really far right. And they're all the same people. They're little jackasses on the internet with
but that's it.
I mean, tiny testicles.
Thank you, Mathias.
Well,
thank you.
We're running
That is absolutely true.
We're running the raffle for the horn that I made, the Ukraine, that kind of with a symbol. So Saxon Storyteller, who does our artwork, did a design of the emblem with a shield in the middle. So I did carve that, and then I'm raffling it off. So you can go grab a ticket.
Oh, great!
You can go grab a ticket. It's up until Saturday, so anybody watching this can still grab one. I think it might be too late by the time the episode comes out.
Daniel.
But so we're going to donate all the money, and I had someone comment on the post saying, "Oh, so I'm never buying from this company again. You're supporting a fascist regime." And I was like,
oh god.
Firstly, fuck off. And secondly, it's like, you clearly know nothing about my company. Like, you've done no research into our company and what we do, if that's the angle that you're going to come. And it's just, it's so frustrating that it seems no matter what you do, and we get the same with the podcast sometimes, no matter what you do, there's just someone who's upset or offended and whether they are or not, I don't know, but they like to portray that they are anyway.
But Daniel, when you do a raffle like that, which I think is super admirable, is that money going to fund that Ukraine can get MiG-29s flown into them, or is it going to humanitarian work?
Oh, it's going completely to humanitarian work. We're sending to the We're
so
sending to the DEC.
So how are you supporting a fascist regime? I mean, this is what happens, and this is what's been going on since the dawn of perhaps since the dawn of humanity, but maybe or at least since the dawn of civilization. you know, fuckery goes on at the higher echelons of power. That's just a fact. I mean, pick out any time period that we have a grasp on, and you will see fuckery galore. And it's always people that suffer. And the terrible thing about things like this is that, you know, all of a sudden Russians are now bad people somehow. My daughter's piano teacher, and she's just changed from piano to violin, I should say. Her violin teacher is Russian, right? I mean, is Russian. I have great friends in Russia. I have great friends in Ukraine. You know, it's such a tragedy because, you know, because what's really happening now is that with Ukraine being attacked, natural reaction from Ukraine is to become even more Ukrainian and think more about what it means to be Indian. Because when attacked, you need to garner that feeling of being something, of belonging to something, so that it doesn't get destroyed. It's totally putting up your walls, and it's totally understandable. Then the West starts sanctioning Russia. Then Russians become even more Russian because they go like, look at these fucking assholes in the West, right? Look at what they're doing to us, you know? So they become even more Russian. And then you have everyone in the West going, Putin thinks he can split us apart, but he is just uniting us even more. So what's happening is that Ukraine is going, Russia is going, the West is going, and no one's going like, which we should be doing, you know? But no one's doing that. So again, like, this what happens with people in power and us normal people who just want to sing and dance and eat and fuck and all these things. We can't do that anymore because someone needs a new pipeline or whatever the fuck, you know?
Well, that's the thing, right?
Can we just agree on that?
That's also the problem that we're dealing with right now, right? Like what we're seeing is that Putin is not personally affected by the sanctions. That's going to be the common Russian, you know, and especially the poor Russians. Who are the people who are affected by the war directly in Ukraine? That's everyday people, just your normal, regular people. They're affected by that, right? The people who commence the fuckery at those higher governmental levels, right? They aren't the ones who are taking the the casualties and tolls, right?
No, they'll be fine.
They'll be fine.
I do want to ask Shan if we can soundbite Jonas's little and noises, just in case I ever want to use them in the future in some capacity. I don't know how, but I feel like we can use them as I want a little soundboard of clips for when I say something or somebody says something that's really good, and it can be like Jonas going,
gross, but sure.
That's like that can be like my new little button for when something's really mind blowing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I also have it. I find it so hilarious when you know you have Biden and these kind of people that support him going out and like Putin's evil war, you know, and Putin's evil actions and so on. And it's like Biden. I mean, the Hunter Biden stuff. The Biden family has been such a
didn't that dude also vote for
forever?
Didn't that dude also vote for invading Iraq or something like that?
Yeah, of course.
Did.
I mean, of course. I mean, it's just again. It's just when you get up there. You're all liars. You're all criminals. You're all pieces of shit, and you have been that since the fucking dawn of big civilization. You read anything about the Roman Empire, they were all liars. They were all criminals. I mean, I'm just so tired of it. What I don't understand about it is that how can this happen in this day and age? I just had the most beautiful image in my head right now. My daughter, who's half Indian, she was standing in a sari. They just came back from India, so she's gotten this beautiful sari that she inherited from her grandmother. She was standing in the sari, and then she all of a sudden started to sing this Russian song. You know, it's a Russian pop song from a Russian commercial. Why is she singing that? Because it's trending on TikTok, right?
TikTok.
again, like we connected as a society. We are sharing each other's cultures and each other's songs, even if it's a stupid commercial song, who cares? Willy-nilly, right? How are we? How are we still buying these narratives, these grand, stupid fucking narratives? Like that, isn't there something really called Russian? You know, fucking half of all Russians' famous poets and writers were from fucking Ukraine. You know, I mean, Chekhov and Pushkin, whatever, you name it. Like, it's just, it's so like,
It's because
yeah,
it's just because of the media. Because I saw an article earlier with it was the headline of, I think it was like a social media influencer, a Russian lady, and she spoke out against Putin a couple of years ago, not recently. She was quite kind of against him, opposed to Putin, and she spoke out. And the headline read something like, "Putin, or influencer who speaks out against Putin found dead or found in a suitcase or something." It was something like that. But then when you read the article, a boyfriend just fucking killed her and put her in a suitcase and left her in the woods. But the obviously the media don't, they know that right now Putin is a clickbaity word, and they want to get that in there. So what they've done is obviously written this article and included Putin in the headline and made it sound like, you know, he's gone and got rid of her because she's dared to speak out against him, when that's not the true story. And that happens more and more because they just want to get.
But I think, Daniel, what you're doing right now is carrying water for Putin. You know, be careful.
Oh, maybe. Right.
All right, guys.
Let's talk about me. I'm joking.
Yeah, I want to get into the main part of the show. So, I mean,
let's go for it.
We're talking about with the dude who literally just fish hooked me to do a podcast 2 years ago, and I want to know who he is.
I would really like to know it as well. Actually,
I've knocked my drum over in excitement.
Oh no,
that's not a euphemism either. An actual drum.
I suppose the first question that's on everybody's mind is, I mean, you were a plumber, right? Back in the day.
Well, a gas engineer, if I want to sound special.
Ooh, HVAC.
A gas engineer.
That just means that I went a little bit further to get my gas qualifications.
Ooh.
Cool. And then, why horns? I mean, because I suppose you started with the horns. No, well, is that a good place to start, Mathias, or should we go like, why did you get interested
even further back? No. I think starting with the horn story, because you've alluded to that one a couple of times already. How you got into doing drinking horns. So I wanna hear that. Like I think that's a great place to start. Why did you end up selling drinking horns?
I mean, how long have we got? That one's completely Sarah's fault, I think. I'm gonna expose myself during this episode so bad. So I am one of those people that got brought into this community from the Vikings TV show, and no matter how much I try to hide it, that's the reality of it. Because we used to watch it when it first came out and got really interested in it, and then Sarah bought me tickets for my birthday to go to the Jorvik Viking Festival. And when we were walking around, there was a bunch of horns, and obviously, you know, I'm a lad and I wanted a drinking horn, but they were all really expensive. I was only quite young at the time and wasn't making that much as a plumber, I guess. And they were all quite expensive. So there was one place at the end of the day that had these horns, and they were quite cheap. But I didn't know why, so I bought it and got it home, and then tried to drink out of it. And it just tasted like absolute shit. It was horrible, and clearly it was just a raw horn. It hadn't really been finished on the outside. They hadn't done anything on the inside. It's really quite bad that they sold me this fucking raw horn that hadn't been treated in any way, and I just took it as drinking on. And
did it taste like goat then? I mean, did it get like?
It was. I mean, yeah, it wasn't nice because obviously it's filled with like a marrow, so they just and however long they've been sat there as well. But I mean, the people knew what they were doing. They might not have said, "Oh, it's a drinking horn," but they know why I'm buying it, I guess. And so I had that, and I'm just one of these people that when I when I do something, I have to kind of go 100% it. So I started researching how to make drinking horns. How does it work? What do you do? So I kind of did that, carved it all with a Dremel that my dad lent me, and then I contacted a silversmith and had to make some metal bands for it. And what I originally did with that one was I cured it with Guinness. I just cleaned it and then left it sat with Guinness, and a heavy stout would soak up into the fibers of the horn and kind of gives it a curing. I wouldn't sell them necessarily like that because I don't know how safe that is. Like, we use a food grade beeswax now, but obviously for myself, I think it's all right. It's always been okay. And then I just took a picture of it, and a friend wanted one, so I made him one. And then another friend of mine, one of my really good friends, was like, "Look, these are good. You should just try sell them." So I made an Etsy page and put a couple of listings on there, and people just kept buying it, because even then I didn't have any finished ones. I just took pictures of mine and were like, "Look, I made this cool thing. I can make you one if you give me like a design or an idea that you like." And I just kind of draw it up and send them pictures, and people just kept buying them. So the garage we had at home, I kind of turned it into a part garage, half workshop at the time. It had all our stuff in and a little desk in the middle, and I'd go in there when I finished my plumbing duties for the day and carve some horns and sand them. And it was, I mean, looking back now, it was ridiculous, because just the amount of dust that I just didn't even think about. It was, yeah, because I didn't think I'd because I was trying to always make everything faster and better, work smarter, not harder. So I'd like buy a pillar drill and put a little sanding wheel on it and use that to sand it. But then obviously that just creates so much dust.
I mean, so you're literally Daniel the Bone Full, because you've been literally just like sniffing and breathing bone dust for like years.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even like
bone long. Yeah.
I try not to even think about that, to be honest. No, I do wear a mask. I'd always tell people to wear a mask. Like now, I'm lucky enough to have like a big professional extraction system that we had installed. But for the longest time,
cool.
I mean, I worked in this room that I podcast in now was the studio. I mean, it was the old workshop. And where the camera is, that was like my little carving desk. And where I'm sat now, I'd have like 3 machines set up on a bench, and the cupboard next to me was like a little extraction unit in it. And me and Eddie, the guy that worked for me towards the end, like, we'd be in here, and this place would just be full of dust. We'd have masks on, especially in the summer. It would be ridiculously warm. But yeah, I guess we just kept it going somehow. But I guess it turned out to be worth it in the end.
It does seem like it. So what were some of the first inspirations for like things you carved on the ones? Did you just like take requests, or did you also like try to find out like what would look good on a horn and try to find sources and all that stuff?
I think this is why I kind of understand the new people that come into this so much, and how they see it, and always try to speak on their behalf, maybe, even though I take the piss out of them quite often on the podcast. Also, I do like to try to understand it from their perspective, because I was there, and I'm one of those people that at this very start, I thought the helm of all was a Viking symbol. I thought the Vigvisir was a Viking symbol. So I mean, yeah, without a doubt, they're still 2 of the most popular horns that I'll make, because they just are such incredibly popular designs, regardless of them not being quote unquote Viking. They're just a powerhouse of symbols. For whatever reason, those 2 have just caught the imagination in modern times. So those 2 were always very popular. But because I had limited time, I couldn't like make horns ahead of time and like advertise them. So it was literally just taking requests of whatever anyone wanted, and I would make make that, and then I guess I just tried to research as I was going. But that's why again, going back to why I say I sympathize with people, because I was plumbing like 9 to 5. Then I was trying to make horns on an evening, and then trying to research like what all these different things were and what they meant. You only have so much time to do it, so you kind of do click on the basic articles and read it a little bit, or see things online and absorb that as fact, I guess, when it's not, and you need to delve a little bit deeper, or listen to this podcast.
Or listen to this podcast, yeah.
I'll listen to this podcast. Yeah. Indeed.
So yeah.
So you did. So just to get a timeline on this, you did this, or did you already say that? Because I just went away for getting myself a bit of rum. But so to get a timeline on it, you started like that in your garage. You just did it sort of for people, and it sort of grew and grew and grew. And for how long until you started thinking, okay, now we've done all these horns, and now we want to move into clothing and all that? And what gave you the idea?
Oh, so I think I probably did just the horns for maybe like 2 years, just kind of on an evening when I could. Saved up a little bit of money. It helped pay for our kitchen doing. And I saved the money. Because I was working full time, I had this idea that if I just invested pretty much everything back into the business, or back into the horns, getting better machinery, getting better equipment, buying more stock, and just doing that, then maybe it could become something bigger. And then I guess it came to a point where it was we'd met a leathersmith that I found on Etsy to make like the horn holders. So I had him make some belts and some like belt bags and that kind of thing. And then the lady that makes the rims for the horn, she lives about 10 minutes away. She's from our town. So we had her make some jewelry with runes on, and kind of the helm of Order of Iglesia, that kind of things, and some quote unquote Viking jewelry. And then just kind of started to try and expand it, because I figured if I wanted to make a business from it, then it needed to be more than just horns. It needed to be kind of an all-encompassing brand, I guess. And then I would say the clothing is just an ego thing. I think there's so many brands that that's like the very honest truth of it, though, is that I think so many brands think clothing is gonna, because it looks cool, it looks good if someone's wearing your t-shirt, wearing your clothes. It is very, it does kind of massage your ego a bit in that sense. But it's so hard to make a clothing brand work. Like if we did just clothing, there's no way we could exist as a company, because it's just so hard to sell, because there's so much competition. Obviously, whether it's just in the Viking world or in general, there's so many clothing brands and so many people that do it really well, and they can always probably do it cheaper. So I think I started that as more of like and massage the ego, because it was cool and that's what everyone else was doing, and it felt like it felt like what you should do, I guess. And the first I had these grand ambitions of thinking that the first designs we were going to do were going to sell hundreds or thousands of, and then when it comes to it and you sell like 10, and it's like, that's not what I expected this to be. But that's how it is. It's just not, it's such a competitive market. And then I think I've got better at kind of understanding maybe what people want and clothing wise, and trying to be something different and kind of find our own lane, because so many clothing brands I think are artist driven. There's some amazing companies out there, like Razorstone were one of the first ones that I found, and were kind of Tom from Razorstone was very much there as we were starting. Has always been a friend of mine, and very, very good to me in a sense of like helping me guide my way through things and understand stuff, and always there for a conversation. But with him, he's artist driven, so he can draw designs, whereas for me, I always had to outsource it to somebody else to do the design, to then kind of put on a t-shirt. So he's always had like that extra step, which is why I think I've tried to make a brand out of Horns of Odin in a sense, rather than like big designs, kind of make really nice looking clothes that maybe are more subtle for people who want to kind of have this stuff involved, but not like a huge kind of design all the time, I guess. And I think we'll try and we'll find a spot there. I like the stuff we make.
I think it's great material that you use too. A lot of it, you try to be very conscious too, right, about the materials that you select and those kinds of things. For
I mean, when did you send me the t-shirts that you sent? You sent me 3, I think, t-shirts.
That was a
back when I lived. That was back when I lived in London. So it's way more than 2 years ago.
Yeah, that'll have been right back when we were first kind of starting. And one of the other things, I think it's so easy to want to do so much and do bits of everything.
I was gonna give you a compliment, like just to say that I still wear those t-shirts and they're still looking great.
Good.
It's quite amazing, because if you buy a t-shirt from H&M and you wear it fairly regularly, if it has if it lives for a year, if it lives for a year, you're lucky. You know, usually they don't even live that long. So you're definitely doing something right. Not just massaging your ego or your balls, or your
you can do both.
Or I could do both. But no, I'm really serious. It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff.
No, I think
sure.
me and Sarah went to Primark the other day. I don't know. Do you have Primark in the USA?
No, but
you know what it is because you lived in.
I lived in London. Yeah.
London. It's what would it, Jonas? What would that be in American terms? Target, something like that.
Target or H&M. You've got H&M fairly. You've got a lot of H&Ms in. I saw them a lot in New York, at least. I've been there for a fair bit, so I don't know. But yeah, Target probably.
Yeah, very cheap, fast fashion. So I got some jeans from there because they do stretchy fabric jeans, and I have
giant balls.
giant balls after this episode
from all that massaging.
I guess I have big legs from when I used to play rugby. So stretchy jeans are the only jeans that work for me. So anyway, we were in Primark and
seeing this gigantic balls in your tight pants right now. God!
It's like the South Park episode where Randy gets giant balls and he's bouncing around. He's hopping around on them like a space hopper. But we were in there.
Sorry.
I mean and Sarah were wandering around, and it's like how do you compete with that, because they had NFL jerseys for like £10. They must buy the license and make their own, and Disney branded stuff and a Marvel branded stuff, and it's like £10 a t-shirt or whatever, and it's like how do you compete with that as a company? And I guess the only way you can do really is make quality things, and then also try and get a loyal customer base who like what you do. Because it's almost impossible to compete with those kind of companies as a small clothing brand.
Where is it produced? In which country?
Which ones?
Well, your t-shirts, for instance.
Our stuff,
like your cotton stuff.
So the t-shirt, the base material themselves come from, I think they're Taiwan. I think so. They're using organic. They're using organic cotton for the t-shirt, but the produced in Taiwan and then printed in the UK. I mean, I've actually tried to look anywhere for like a UK t-shirt, but they just don't seem to exist. Unfortunately, everything just got outsourced. And to find somebody who you can find a dozen people who like print them or do the embroidery on them, but when it comes to making the actual garment, it's all either China, Taiwan. It's. But I think people have a negative, can have quite a negative connotation on stuff coming from over there. But I don't think it has to be.
What do you mean? How can they have that? Everything
I know,
comes from over
but people
there.
do, though, don't they?
So you can be naked, or you can make your own clothes from linen and hemp.
I think one of the things,
but that's not a bad idea. But I mean, I'm just saying, like,
well, one of the problems is, of course, as Frederick is also highlighting in the chat, like, what are the workers' rights in those countries? And that's, China has, those suicide factories, for instance, like,
for sure,
where people literally jump out of the windows and they put nets up to catch them. Which,
and I wasn't that.
I don't know what's worse here. Like,
was that the Apple factory? I don't know,
something like that. But aside from that, there's also,
please don't sue me. Allegedly.
Yeah, everything allegedly. Anyway, aside from that, there's also, of course, the resources that go into transporting the material, right? That is made in Taiwan all the way to the UK or the US and so on. I mean, I can see why some would have issues with that. But on the other hand, I mean, obviously there's a much more profound problem here, right? If there are certain types of things that are only produced in one region of the world, you have to ask yourself, well, what is the rest of the world doing to avoid to produce that, right? Like, well, what is happening? What is happening in the EU, for instance, or in the UK, or in the US, for that matter, that makes it more opportune to have a production on the other side of the planet, right? And sometimes here in the US, you can buy like food products where it's like grown in Chile, packed in Bangladesh.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What the fuck happened right there? Like, well, how
Yeah.
the hell was this thing grown in South America and then all the way to Asia and then ends up on a market in the
just
US?
take apples. Apples are a lot of times flown to Brazil to be waxed, and then from England to Brazil to be waxed, and then back to England again because it's cheaper to wax in Brazil.
Me?
That says
Well,
how is that cheaper? But yeah, I think for us,
yeah, how is that cheaper?
How can it be? But I mean, for us, we always try and we try to do our best where we can. So like some of our stuff, a lot of the like woolen and knitted type stuff is made in the UK because we know a company that can make them, and that's what we can do. But when it comes to t-shirts, I just haven't come across one. So if anybody does know one, then please do let me know, because it is something we'll always try and get better. I don't think anyone's perfect whatever they do, and we're always trying to improve and look for new people to work with, new suppliers, new ways to make everything better and kind of more streamlined.
I think it's also it's incredibly difficult to apply Western standards onto a country like, for instance, India, which, I mean, I don't know too much about India, any of the other countries, but I do know about India, and I do know a fair bit about the garment production in India as well, because Nana was dabbling in that many years ago, but we were traveling quite a lot in India to find the most sustainable, the most this and that and the other, and it is extremely difficult, even with like the silk industry. I remember seeing this place that was supposedly fully organic, and they were using what you call peace silk, where they don't kill the butterfly. So the larvae becomes a butterfly and it flies away. Tassar silk is another word for it. So it's more sustainable because the butterfly gets to keep. You actually take the cocoon and you boil it straight away to make that fine Chinese silk. But anyways, the point is that I remember going to that factory, and it was all these women sitting and spinning this tassar silk. And there was, when we came to visit that place, we came as Western potential customers. So there was like 20 men walking around with us. I might be exaggerating. Maybe it was only 10, but in my head, it felt like 20. They were just walking around with us, and they didn't seem to be really doing anything at all. Like, they didn't seem to have any real job or anything. They were just walking around, and while all these other people were working for tuppence, and I heard kind of really terrible stories about the men being drunk and the women working in these things for tuppence a month and taking care of the children. It was not a very pleasant sight. It's probably much more pleasant than whatever Frederick is talking about happening in Bangladesh. But I'm just trying to say that it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to find something that is truly sustainable. That was my experience. There are some, for sure. We found a lady in South India that does amazing organic cotton, extreme policies and so on and so forth. But her organic cotton is also very expensive, and is,
it's
probably
for
just
us,
bought by Hollywood stars and so on.
Yeah, for us, it's trying to find that balance of being as kind of sustainable and eco-friendly as we can, but also be able to give value and things that are affordable. Because obviously, at the end of the day, it's a business, and I need to try and make a living off it as well. So it's just finding that balance and then trying to improve things as you go. But I would like to say that there are things in place now, particularly with like India and China, where you can look at factories will get independent ratings. There'll be independent people who go and kind of do surveys on factories, and you can then pick your supplier based on that. So there are ways to kind of try and avoid feeding into those situations like you were saying, and we'll always try and pick the best ones we can where hopefully we know that they're being treated right and fairly and being paid a fair wage.
Sure.
So yeah, there's ways to check, and we, like I say, we try and do that wherever we can. But
it seems I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Clothing is
We're going to say that.
Like I say, clothing is the only thing. It's the only real last piece of the puzzle, I think, like that. Everything, we try to keep everything as close to us as possible. Like I say, the jewelry is 5 minutes from us, and our leathersmiths up in Newcastle, we get candles from a lady in the UK. A lot of the mead suppliers in York, and we kind of developed that with them. Everything we try to keep as local as possible. It's just, again, with the clothing, that's the one kind of last piece that we're just trying to figure out and get that to slot in, and hopefully at some point we can find somebody over here. But until then, we'll just do things to try and keep it as good as we can.
And it has to happen slowly, right? Because I mean, if you imagine if Westerners had the opportunity or whatever to sort of just say, no, we're not buying any more from these slave factories. If that was the solution, you would also ruin a lot of people. So like, it's not. These things are, as you like to say on the podcast, complicated, right? I mean, it's just So you got to just try, and you just got to, do the best you can.
I just want to throw in there, I don't buy anything from slave factories.
Good to hear. So,
no, you just have me as a podcast slave telling stories for free.
That's true.
He's got multiple podcast slaves here. No, I mean, so think about how actually the Industrial Revolution came about in England back in the day. That was a lot of textile factories in particular. And also, consider how conditions were for those workers back then in the 1700s and 1800s. I mean, that was horrible conditions. It was child labor. All the things that we now point our fingers at these different countries like India, for instance, for doing, right? And I mean, it's, as you say, incredibly complicated, and obviously, I mean, in my opinion, it's not okay to not pay your workers a living wage, and it's not okay to
obviously
exploit human beings in general. but there are also like processes that these kinds of societies go through in terms of their emerging industries, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I mean, it's and we can't just sit here and be all high and mighty about that shit in our nice comfy chairs with our big fat asses, like.
No.
So.
No, I
and our rum from Barbados and all that stuff. Yeah.
No, I was actually talking about that the other day. How when we went through kind of like the Industrial Revolution, there wasn't anybody who'd already been there, done it. That was sat kind of above that could be judgely looking down upon and be like, you're doing it all wrong. We went through it, and then now these other countries we're kind of sat going, oh, we can't do that, and it's like, well, we did that. It's just we didn't have anyone that had already done it to say that it was wrong. So it is a very complicated situation.
And I mean, and also in that process of going from having those kinds of productions that are very exploitative, right? There was a lot of workers' blood that was spilled, fighting for better rights. Like that's part of that that whole situation too. So it's hypocritical to be on the one hand like these very comfortable societies that are sitting there pointing their fingers at these countries that have these productions that are very similar to the ones that we used to have, and then at the same time also buying their stuff and for instance in huge very cheap stores like H&M and that kind of stuff, right?
I don't remember where it was, but there was somewhere. Was it in the 1800s and so on? I can't remember. It was somewhere in northern Europe. I remember if it was Scandinavia, Germany, or England, or whatever. I remember there was like a law that was passed prohibiting children from working more than 10 hours a day. That happened in the course of the Industrial Revolution. It's like, 10 hours. That has to be enough. 10 hours a day for children under 10 or whatever it was.
I'm pretty sure that's like that's probably England where it starts, and then you get the same types of laws in Denmark and so on. And at some point you get to a point where like, hey, you know what, sending 6-year-olds down into a coal mine, it's just not cool, man. And then you get actual protection. So
10 hours a day.
It's a bit
maximum.
It's a bit much.
Yeah.
So where were we before we got
I'm interested, Dan. Is like, okay, so you say it was the Viking television show that got you interested in Vikings and such, but I'm just thinking that there must have been something before that, or was there really nothing before that? That sort of. I mean, were you interested in similar things before that, like Lord of the Rings, or?
I've always been interested in history, like a huge interest in history. I had an amazing history teacher in high school, Mr. Ainley. If you happen to be listening to this, then I guess everything that I do now is probably inspiration from that, because he was just an awesome teacher who was a really good storyteller, and kind of grabbed everybody's attention.
What was his name? Mr. what?
Mr. Ainley. He was
Mr. Ainley. Shout out to Mr. Ainley. Okay.
He was a really good one. So I did history at high school, then I went on to do my A levels and took history. I did A levels. I went to kind of like higher education, but just decided I didn't want to go to university, and then became a plumber. So I always thought.
What was your main subjects in A levels?
I did medieval history, law, PE, and then at AS I did politics. So yeah, I did all right academically. I play the fool on here quite often, but I did all right. I just didn't want to go to university. It just wasn't for me. I didn't particularly. I saw my sister go before me. I kind of saw the debt she got, and she left and didn't really end up using her degree for anything. So I decided it wasn't for me. But I always knew that I wouldn't stick with plumbing forever. I just didn't know what else I'd do. But yeah, I don't think I mean, I knew of the Vikings and knew bits about kind of like around that world and kind of the very entry knowledge of the Norse kind of mythology, I guess, but nothing major. And it wasn't kind of all stemmed from getting interested in the TV show and then build into whatever it is that it is today, I guess, and doing this show with Mathias.
An empire. That's what it is.
Maybe one day. We're trying.
I just think we're getting so much material for the OnlyFans because you start by being the generic porn video that we've all seen. Was like, I've heard you have trouble with your to fix your plumbing. That's the first one, right? And the second one is that you then transcended into something to do with horns. Your defense is basically just you coming. You want the pipe or you want the horn?
I think I've heard.
Why does he have to sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger for that?
Because it's always German porn movies that has something to do with plumbing. I don't know why it's just
interesting.
Yeah, I've heard every horn joke.
Yeah, I don't know why it is.
I think I've heard every single one. But yeah, so it was all kind of just it's all just something that happened. I think it just kept going step by step. There was never any kind of real great goal. And then I think until I met Mathias, I was very much probably one of those. I probably describe myself as a Viking bro, even though I might not want to. To outsiders to looking back on me then, I probably was very much that kind of opinion. I thought I knew more than I did about this stuff. And then Mathias,
sure we've all been Viking bros at some point.
Mathias spent 2 years telling me everything I thought I knew was fucking wrong, and beating me down week by week and just stripping it apart.
Is that why, Daniel, you're all over Facebook battling the Viking bros wherever you find them? Because you were once one, but now you're converted, so you're sort of like out there to.
I feel a responsibility.
Convert the rest of
once he was lost,
wretches.
But now he's found.
I feel the responsibility to guide them towards the
light.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get them to listen to the podcast. Really.
Yeah. That's a worthy goal.
Yeah.
You're an idiot. Listen to my podcast.
I just think it's so funny because I'm on these groups that I try not to engage, but every time I see something totally ridiculous being put up in one of these groups, I immediately just go down to see if Daniel said anything, and 70% you said something. 70% of the time you said something. You went like, "This is not a Viking symbol," or "That's Odinism is really not a word you want to use." Like those kind of things every time.
It's usually just quoting something that Mathias said the week before. That's all it is.
I'm glad my voice is out there without me actually starting real ugly fights with those kinds of people. Because I am not capable.
Daniel is spreading your knowledge by proxy.
That's fine by me, man.
You're there in spirit.
No, but it is. I mean, that I don't know. I never sort of like really followed whether you get down in deep, sort of like if you get really into the weeds with those folks. But yeah, it's. I understand why you left, Mathias. I really do.
I mean, it's just like if your goal is to make humanity smarter, and that's one of my goals. Like at least where I can contribute.
Yeah.
Don't get off Facebook, because nobody. I can even quote Old Norse scripture on that one. Like Odin says in Halvamal, don't argue with fools, right? And that goes for the fools and those who are not fools. If you're a fool and you're arguing with others, then you're both fools, essentially. Because it's just you're wasting your time on something that is inessential. Like Facebook doesn't produce anything. Like all it does is advertise. It's like the white pages, the yellow pages, or whatever you call it, wherever you're from, right? Like it's just this version of it. Just have you arguing and bickering at the same time as you're receiving ads, right?
Yeah,
that's it.
It's tough because, like I say, I know because I've been there. I've been on both sides. I know I will have been at some point that arsehole in the group who thought he knew best, and then tried to argue something that I knew, and somebody who knew more and probably knew correctly was telling me I was wrong, but I'd dig my heels in and be like, no, I'm right because I read it on a blog somewhere. So I know that I've been there. So I guess I think, oh well, maybe if I tell them the right thing, they'll listen, or maybe if I tell them to come listen to the podcast, they'll do it. But then nobody ever does. I don't ever get anywhere. It just feels like I'm banging my head against a brick wall. So it's really infuriating because then I just think, was I like that? Was I that bad? And then it's kind of it comes full circle. It's like, but then maybe I should keep trying because maybe then I could get
no.
But...
It's a strange thing. I mean, I saw our dear friend and someone I admire a lot. Rune he wasn't arguing really with someone. It was on Facebook. It was something on his Nordic Animism channel. Someone else had posted something in there, and this guy started just firing at them. And Rune, being the diplomat that he is, tried to sort of go in and sort of ask him a question and sort of, I'm genuinely interested in this point of view that you're putting forward. Could you please sort of elaborate a bit on what you're trying to say here? And Rune just got more vitriolic bullshit thrown in his face. And then he tried again, and you could really see Rune struggling to sort of, in Danish we say, put oil on the waters, calm the waters of this fiery spirit online, this fiery troll that was obviously just there to, to be this edgelord that you talked about before, Mathias. It is clearly that. Clearly he was simply just, this guy was relishing in his own perceived cleverness, because he was quite eloquent. Actually, he wrote, his English was a high level, and he definitely eloquent, but he was like a guy who was saying, come over to my side of the aisle by kicking and pushing. Like imagine it's like, come here, come here. That's kind of, how can you talk to a guy like that? You can't like, oh yeah. That's all you're gonna get if you try to come close to a guy like that. So it's futile. It's absolutely futile. And I don't know why you do it, Daniel, but I hope you have fun.
I do have fun. Yeah, no,
that's good. At least
I definitely have fun. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to know about the business before we move on to anything else?
Yeah, surely.
Go on.
I want to know how you guys. You have probably talked about this before, but so you were doing this business and so on. It was going great, and you wanted to know more about Viking stuff, I suppose. And how did you guys meet and think we're doing this podcast thing? Because I remember hearing your first episodes, and this actually the reason why
how terrible they were.
No, they were not. They were bad quality sound and so on, but they were. I liked the conversation between a layman and a professor. I like that format, and I had listened to some other podcasts at that time, and didn't find. I didn't, well, even if they were better quality and so on, yours were more like being invited into a room, and I could just drive in my car and feel that there was these two guys next to me talking Viking shit. That was the cool thing about it.
I think for me, I have a childlike curiosity, but I don't mind asking the question, and I don't mind if I look stupid or I come across a bit of an idiot, because I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to ask it. Someone else was probably thinking the same thing. So if I look silly, who cares? I think maybe people have found that quite endearing over the last 100 and odd episodes, that it is just because most of the questions, well, pretty much all of the questions I ask are just in my mind. That's what I'm thinking in that moment. And I'm just, fuck it, I'm going to ask. We don't plan any of these episodes. You can attest to that, Jonas. You've been here many times. We very much kind of just pick a subject, pick a guest, and go, all right, let's talk for an hour and a half and see what happens. So all the questions are very much in the moment, and just me going, all right, I don't understand this. Well, what does that mean? And I've learned so much from this podcast, not just history based. I think just sometimes it's about what words are in general, what some English words are. There's been some stuff that people have said, and I'm like, Mathias, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, Daniel started bugging me at some point. I think he had seen a couple of my YouTube videos. We had been in contact about this issue with you guys using non-white models and then getting a bunch of racist backlash. People calling it cultural appropriation. What the fuck? And
yeah, that's definitely what, I can't remember what group it was. There was a group.
Yeah, we came across each other in that context, and we talked a little bit about that and so on. And then you saw a couple of my YouTube videos, and then you were like, you know what? You should do a podcast. Actually, you should do a podcast with me. and I started thinking, you know what? That's actually a great idea. A podcast that's based off of like somebody who's like a professional scholar in this field, talking to somebody who's a lay person, because there's not a lot of that out there. There's not a lot of, like, there are two ways really that Nordic mythology stuff are communicated out there. There are scholars who communicate primarily to other scholars, and that's just that. And then there's the popular machinery, or whatever you want to call it, right? Where you mostly get it's like sort of like a reinforcement of the same myths and stereotypes about the Viking Age or mythology or whatever it is. And I'd say that happens in all the popular shows and movies that I've seen so far. Like the reinforcement of, like, for instance, the barbarian stereotype is always there when it comes to Vikings. I've never seen anybody try to actually untangle that or dissolve it. Sometimes it does look like they try with Vikings, honestly, but it's still predicated on the same notion that these were barbarians that came from Scandinavia and then invaded England, period. That's always the same idea, right? So in that way, like, somebody like Dan asking questions about all of this based off of his knowledge from popular shows like that is a great place to start, just to begin actually explaining how complicated history is. And I mean, it's not just the Viking Age that's complicated. It's also later periods and earlier periods. And you just go back and look at World War II and see just how much material we have written on World War II, like as humanity and as such at this point. And that's because there are so many perspectives. This is of course, a period in time is so much closer to us. So there's so many perspectives you can get on all of these different events that were involved in what we call World War II, right? Like, just think about it on sort of like a macro level. All these different events, like you could be in Bosnia, or you could be in somewhere in the Balkans, you could be in France, you could be Polish, you could be Jewish, you could be German, you could be a lot of different things. There's so many perspectives. Ukrainian for that matter. Yes. Yeah, or one of those Russian soldiers who just had to cross the Volga to Stalingrad as they were getting fired on by the Germans, and if they went back, they'd get shot by the generals, right? Khrushchev, by the way. So it's like all of these different things, right? All of these different perspectives are available on that in different ways. Now, that in many ways that's similar with any other time period. We're dealing with the Viking Age, and our source material is so limited. We have some material culture that we can access through digging in the ground. And the main, overall, on a sort of like a global scale, the people who have defined Vikings outwards to any other people on the planet except for Scandinavians is the English, right? Like that if you are in India and you're Indian and you know anything about Vikings, your information has somehow gone through the filter of England before it gets to you, right? So that's also something to consider. There's like a sort of like a funnel that just like compresses the information and then spits it out there, right? So, starting a podcast where we talk about these things and highlight just how complicated it is and get into the nitty-gritty of it and scatter a bunch of curse words. What?
England. James was saying England for the win, and I just
oh my
said,
god,
stuff it to a certain place. Okay.
But I thought that was a great idea to begin with. So that's how it started,
Yeah, I never knew we'd do 107 episodes, and I still feel like I know fucking nothing. Like I mean, without a doubt, I've learned an incredible amount, and I find myself when I'm in these little Facebook engagements that I've learned so much. Stuff just comes out of my head from somewhere that Mathias has said at some point on the podcast, and it's just there. It just appears, and I'm like, oh fucking hell, I actually know something. But in the same breath, I feel like I know nothing as well, because we'll have other conversations or we'll have other guests on it, and it's like, I don't understand this.
But Daniel, that's where I would say that depends on what you mean by knowing, right? And I don't know, Mathias, you might echo what I'm about to say, or you might have something else that would be interesting anyways. But I would say when it comes to history, because I, like you, Daniel, have been I'm not a scholar like Mathias in history, but I've been interested in history since I was very young. Like I studied the Roman Empire manically at some point. I was reading books and listening to podcasts and reading online and so on and so forth about the Roman Empire, and I've been interested in Vikings and Viking mythology in particular since I was very young. What I seem to sort of always have as a takeaway from history is that history is all grand narratives in some sense. You can get into some nitty-gritties about a certain bracteate and certain details about that, and that's what Nietzsche calls the sort of antiquarian history. Like that's the dusty tomes on books and that sort of thing. But in general, history is like grand narratives. And even with Second World War that Mathias just mentioned, where we have so much data, actually, what really happened in a lot of these different situations, we don't really know. Like it's very difficult to say. I mean, I'm not starting the whole was there a Holocaust conversation? Because of course there was, but no, because of course there was. It's not what I'm talking. I'm not. I mean, of course, we can know things to a certain degree and so on. But again, history is always based on these grand narratives, and it's all lies in some sense. But what history can be used for is it can tell us a lot about how are human beings, and how do we react to certain things, and how do we play power games, and how do we, it's crazy things that human beings do so that we can be prepared. Like, let me say something extremely controversial, but I don't think it should be actually. If it comes out in 100 years that, there definitely was something called COVID, but a lot of people in power used all this COVID shit to get a lot of politics, a lot of, programs pushed through and blah, blah, blah. And there was all kinds of shit going on in the background. It really wouldn't surprise me that much because I have read of terrible fuckery going on in the Roman Empire. Absolute dreadful fuckery, like faking a grain shortage and people fucking famine like crazy in Rome, and then someone stepping in and said, "I got rid of the pirates," but he was actually the one who paid the pirates. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mathias?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's not very. It's really, you can very strict, like serious details about what really happened can be very difficult to really figure out, but it can tell you something generally about what human beings are capable of, how power play works, so on, and therefore it has extreme value, I'd say, because it talks about the human condition more broadly. And so therefore, if you feel you don't know anything yet, Daniel, you probably never really will, and neither will Mathias or I or anyone, really.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think.
What do you say, Mathias? I just really made myself vulnerable there with what I said. So please, please help me.
I agree. I agree a lot. And it is. First of all, historical periods are always incredibly complicated, right? And it's so funny to compare the movies Pirates of the Caribbean with the actual Pirates of the Caribbean and what they were and who they were and where they were and what they did and all that stuff. And it's
fascinating.
It is incredibly fascinating, and considering just how much the English and French governments at the time used pirates against each other. Right?
Oh yeah,
and and in the Pirates of the Caribbean, there's this like freedom narrative, against the not so much England, but England represented as the East India Trade Company, right? Which is another interesting corporation situation that you're dealing with, right?
Oh yeah.
And what do we find in these pirates, the actual historical pirates? We find Irish and women and slaves, in particular, finding their freedom. We even find a pirate state at one point, which is a democracy, that has then been villainized later on as just criminals, right? It's just so fascinating to consider just how complicated this whole issue of pirates that are a little closer than Vikings, right? And you just have to ask yourself when you then talk about the Viking age, like, what was actually at play back then? What actually happened, right? We have like all of these like Scandinavians that are capable of communicating with each other, but were they aligned with one another? Were they were definitely not those nations that we talk about today. Like, fuck this idea of like Danes being Danes, Norwegians and Swedes being Norwegians and Swedes.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But how are they represented? How did they represent themselves when they, for instance, entered England and so on? Like, there's so many different things to consider here, in terms of complications, and so I think you're totally right when you.
I also want to say that I'm really not saying that that COVID is any of that. I'm just saying there's a lot of fuckery that goes on. There's a lot of fuckery that goes on.
Well,
That's all
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
saying.
exactly. But like, if you think about it in terms of like some kind of like disaster from the outside, like COVID disaster from the outside, and then you have people taking advantage of that in different societies, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
think about
Oh,
it in the
yeah.
same way in England, right? You could see Alfred the Great taking advantage of Vikings as an
Yep.
outside disaster that then makes it possible for him to establish, you know, a English conglomerate state that absorbs Mercia and so on, right? And that's a politically opportune moment for a Saxon king who has had those aspirations, or a dynasty that has had those aspirations for a while, right? It's a very different way of perceiving what is otherwise, in an English context, considered the formation of the nation of England, right?
Yes.
And you could apply the exact same scope to the creation of Norway or the creation of Denmark. That also happens in the Viking Age, right? Like Denmark, if we go by the national narrative of like, oh yeah, we like Harald Bluetooth was sort of like the guy who then was like the unifying father of the nation, blah, blah, blah. And then he put up a Roman stone that said that you're all Christian, and that's how we became Danes and Christian Danes.
Yeah. These are these grand narratives I'm talking about.
Exactly. And you know what? You know what? Like, we only got Christianized. It's very most likely the only reason that Denmark became Christianized was because the Germans fucking invaded us. Like, because that's not the story that the Danish historian Saxo will tell you about Denmark, of course not. But that's the story that the Icelandic historians will tell you about how Denmark became Christianized, right? So boom, there you go. And that's the fascinating thing about all of this, right?
I totally agree, and it's honing in on what I was trying to say with the utility of history, because the history is filled with all these grand narratives, but if you take the time to study it, you realize how incredibly important it is in your life to stay clear of grand narratives entirely, because it is never that simple, ever.
No,
it's always complicated.
Absolutely. I think for the most part we're almost trained to see things just one way, look at just one side, or pick a side. Certainly, you know, this day and age in the UK, particularly for me, since Brexit, it's been like leave or remain, like COVID, vax or no vax,
wax on, wax off.
Everything for years and years now has been like, pick a team. Which team is yours? It's like Trump and whoever is against Hillary or Biden. It's like, say, pick your team. That's your team, and you have to go with them and stick with them no matter what. And the reality is, things are very much more complicated than that. And like you said before, like with COVID, you can have it being a disaster in one hand and people exploiting it in the other. You can have both things surviving and being and existing and being true in the same moment. It's not one or the other. You can have a disaster happens and then people come along and exploit that, because that's what people do. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, you say that somebody exploited it, so that means you're saying that COVID doesn't exist. It's like, well, no, we're saying that they both exist at the same time, because that's how fucking things are. Things are really
saying it's fucking complicated. I've been saying it for 107 fucking episodes. You know, like that.
We've been saying it. We've been saying it for a while. We will be saying it for another 107 episodes. We'll be still saying it.
Absolutely.
No, I think I've said this so many times on here, that the most valuable lesson I have learned from doing this podcast is being comfortable in just accepting that we know nothing, and being comfortable in accepting the unknown, and just being like, yeah, maybe we don't know that, and being happy to just say that, to just be like, with certain things that we'll never know, and it's open to our own interpretation, and just that's as it is. We can with maybe like tattoos, for the example, you know,
Mhm.
we can be guided one way or the other by evidence or by sources or by personal opinion, but the reality is we don't know 100%, and we can't ever say for 100%. So you just have
Yeah.
to be comfortable in that zone of going, you know what, we don't really know. But I think for the most part, for people just getting into this, and for me, like when I just started, you don't want maybes and ifs and buts. You just think you want the right answer, and you think there's always going to be a right answer, and it's right or wrong. And if somebody says this and you think it's the other thing, then you have to argue it because there is a right answer. And then you
Mhm.
kind of, the more you learn, you just go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe we just don't know some stuff. It's a long time
Mhm.
ago, and we're just not really too
And
sure. And that's the main thing I think I've learned, is just being comfortable in going.
But you can apply that to everything in your life, really. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think the ability to stay in the question with everything you do, it doesn't. I'm not talking about apathy, but staying in the question also about like about the great Christian's life. You know, I mean, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, I suppose, in some sense. You know, because we're always trying to find the meaning of life. I mean, this ties into religion and these sort of things. What happens with religion, every time it becomes codified and there's no question about how things are anymore, that's when it becomes pathological, right?
Mm-hmm.
Staying in the question means that you allow for development, you allow for new things to come up, you allow for things to progress in some sense. Yeah.
I got into a discussion the other day, and I'm not gonna say what the discussion was about, but I sat very much in the middle because it was something that I didn't particularly know much about, and I was just asking questions and was just like, I can, someone who had chosen their side, I was like, can you tell me more? Can you explain why you think this? And somebody joined in and was like, oh, you're just sat in the middle. You don't even pick a side, as if that's a bad thing. And I think so many people, it goes back to what I was saying before. So many people have this mentality that you have to pick a team. Whereas I was just in the middle because I just didn't know. I didn't have enough information to choose one way or the other. So I was like, look, tell me more and then I'll figure it out. But for somehow that's seen as being a bad thing because you're unsure and you're in the middle. Whereas really, I think it should be a positive because you can learn. And it's just this weird thing that we have at the minute. Same with like people changing their minds. It's like if you change your mind on something, it's now a negative. You've backtracked. How dare you change your mind or change your opinion? It's like, no, we're fucking humans. We're all growing and changing and adapting and learning. And then maybe I just think differently than I did last week or a couple of years ago. But it's like, you changed your mind.
And it's all about integrity at the end of the day, right? Authenticity, being authentic.
People sniff out. Yeah, people can sniff out when people are just inauthentic. Is that the right word? Inauthentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless they're sort of beguiled by a performative facade, right? I mean,
but even then, though, I think deep down we have like an innate way of kind of sensing. You do sometimes just get a sense of people whether they're genuine or not. There's just some feeling you get.
But what we say in Danish, fis og blålin, right? Like the flashing lights and shit like that, that go with some person, then also can be confusing for people, right? I'm thinking especially of like major pop stars, or reality TV show stars and that kind of stuff, right? Like they can be they can hide behind all the performative stuff, and that way you a lot of people won't be able to actually recognize if they're being authentic or not, because there's so much that has been styled up around them in the first place.
Yeah, right? It also has a lot to do with fear, right? I mean, this whole thing of right now, with Ukraine and Russia and so on, it's like you have to pick a side. You you have to stand with Ukraine, you know, or you have to, or a lot of people, you know, actually more than we probably think, you know, don't stand with Ukraine, they stand with Russia, or they are sympathetic to it, and they want to make their opinions known, right? And it has a lot to do with that sort of thing, that you need to sort of belong to a group in order to feel strong. And I think coming back to the whole thing about authenticity and integrity, it's I kind of want to tell the story if I may. Am I allowed to tell a story? It's another one of my Buddhist stories.
You tell us.
Tell
a story.
Because I really find this to be the most inspirational story ever, in terms of authenticity and integrity and so on. Okay, so it's a story that Alan Watts tells, actually. It's pretty cool. Comes from ancient China. So imagine we're back in ancient China, and there's a general, a fearsome general. Let's call him General Zhao. Zhao, that's a good Chinese name. His name is General Zhao, and he's terrible. And he hates Buddhist monks, like hates them with a vengeance. And he was a great conqueror. And every time he would come to a village, he would go up to the nearby Buddhist monastery and he would disembowel all the Buddhist monks. So naturally, his fearsome reputation preceded him, and every time he came to a new village, and if there was a Buddhist monastery, the Buddhist monks would flee to the mountains, to the forests, wherever they could get away, because you know they certainly didn't want to be disemboweled. This made General Zhao so very pleased with himself. Every time he came to a new village, he came up to the monastery, and all the Buddhist monks would be gone. He had sown fear in their hearts, deep in the hearts of Buddhist monks. And one day he came to a village, and he came up to the monastery. And there, in the center of the courtyard, sat one Buddhist monk. And General Zhao was furious, absolutely livid. Who was this insolent little Buddhist monk who dared to defy him? So he went up to him and he said, "Who are you to defy me? Don't you know who I am? I could have you disemboweled right here and now, and I wouldn't blink an eye." And the Buddhist monk, sitting in his lotus position, looked up at him slowly and said, "Greetings, General Zhao. I do know who you are, but you clearly do not know who I am. Do you know that I could have you disembowel me right here and now, and I wouldn't blink an eye?" So the story doesn't tell anything about whether General Zhao actually did disembowel him or not, because it doesn't matter at that point.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddhist monk has shown the perfect example of integrity and authenticity. He's not going to let himself be pushed around by some general just because he's going to disembowel him. Because the thing is that he'd rather live in integrity and authenticity than he would live in fear of some other person who's just some other guy who happens to be a general with a sword.
There we go.
Anyways, inspirational story.
There we go.
I very much agree.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to know, Jonas?
Are you coming to Miklasbud, Daniel fan?
Yes. Hopefully, me and Mathias might do something there. Fingers crossed. Finally meet.
Yeah.
Decide if we hate each other. we might hate each other.
So we will all finally meet. Well, I suppose, Mathias, will I meet you at Fire in the Mountains before that?
Oh, yes, you will.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I will meet Mathias before I meet you, Daniel.
You two never met?
No.
Never met?
No.
Wow, I thought you two knew each other.
No, we're from the same country.
I just always assumed that you'd met.
No, like I said, I heard about Mathias because of the podcast, because I was just looking for stuff to listen while I was driving, because I was going on a long trip. So I was listening to the podcast, and I thought, hey, that's the Danish guy, but he's a professor and he lives in the US. And when I was got the idea for Neballa, I wanted to find someone to spar with, and I reached out to Mathias, and that's how we got to know each other on a more personal level.
I thought you'd been friends for years.
No, Mathias is what I call a COVID friend.
Yes.
Like I've gotten a few COVID friends who are people that I've sort of developed friendships with, but never met. You and Alex is one. Alex from Find the Mountains is one, and there's a few others. Funny COVID friends.
We will all meet up at Midgard's and maybe just despise each other. Who knows?
Yeah.
We may all be like, fuck this
motherfucker.
This podcast.
What? That would be irony to the highest degree.
It would be horrible though. It would be. Please don't. I hope
there's no
happen.
way. There's no way.
No way. No way. No way. All right. I'm gonna ask you a few questions from the chat then before we.
Sweet.
We go. Somebody asked where we source the horns from. I saw that earlier. So I use a company in the UK. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want anyone else going there. But yeah, no. So the horns we use, they're a byproduct from the meat trade. Unfortunately, a lot of horns get either incinerated or sent to landfill, which is kind of disappointing. Unless people like us get hold of them and do something with them. It's really frustrating. I'm very much of the belief that if any animal ever dies, you should use all of the animal with no waste. But they're just considered a waste product, really. There's very little value to them, I guess, outside of people making drinking horns or using them for some sort of craft. They don't hold any value. And then I saw somebody earlier mentioned, have I ever had any kind of animal rights people question? Oh. And occasionally, it's not as often as you think. And for the most part, when you explain to people, they very much tend to be understand. They understand, when you kind of say, look, they are a waste product. They do get incinerated or go to the landfill if they're not used. It is, but we sometimes get people who are outraged, who will comment, who know no better, like as if you kill the animals for these horns. And it's like, you clearly don't understand life very well, because a cow is an expensive animal, and you're not going to kill a cow for its horns that are worth a couple of dollars. like that doesn't make sense. These are just it's killed for its meat, and then obviously these are just...
kill the cows for the horns.
So honestly, that's the most common outrage that we get from anybody, is that, and people thinking that they're ivory as well. That was one that I had the other day. It's like, how dare you sell like rhino horns? And I'm like, look,
what? Rhino horns?
Yeah, I'm like, look, ivory.
That's illegal.
Like, firstly, it's illegal. I don't think we'd be advertising them on Facebook if it was. And secondly, a rhino horn is worth $150,000, and I have fucking hundreds of these things. I'm like, do you think I'm going to be sat here on Facebook if I have that much? I'm like, of course they're not rhino horn, but
you'd be fucking hanging out with Russian oligarchs in Barbados and just.
I wouldn't be sat here. I mean, I would never get involved with that, no matter how much money there was. But it's that
you say that now, Daniel Farrand. You say that now.
That one's always
no idea. We have got hundreds of rhino horns costing $150,000 each.
Yeah, that's one that always gets me, is when people confuse them with like ivory. It's that I don't understand that one either. But I just think it's just
Oh, it's too
people,
good. Oh,
people just don't know life.
No things about life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Shan asked, why does everything relate back to rugby? I don't know. I played rugby for a long, long time, like from 16 to my late 20s. So it's very relatable, I guess. I spent a lot of time doing it.
I remember the question now because you talked about rugby, and I know you're an MMA fan, right?
Yes.
Yes. So am I. Like I love it dearly, and I have a theory as to why we love MMA. Because I wouldn't myself. Like a lot of people like football, they play football themselves, right? A lot of people that like basketball, they play basketball. It's like it's not like I go into a cage and get beaten to a bloody pulp or try to beat someone else to a bloody pulp either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it is? I have my own theory, but I'd like to know why you like, and maybe it's because of the rugby thing, or maybe it's you know, because that's quite a physical, violent. You could get quite hurt in that, right, and so on. But why do you think that is? Why do you think there is this fascination for boxing and MMA and these sort of things? What do you think it is that draws us towards it?
I mean, I do train and spar, so I would actually probably get in and fight. But
You would?
I think,
Really?
yeah.
What do you train?
I mainly train Muay Thai, but I've done bits of jiu-jitsu and wrestling. But I think, it's because there's that innate sense of war in us and violence that we have to bury down every single day, and pretend doesn't exist. Certainly, I think as men, like I think that is always there, and we know you can't go around being violent, and it's not acceptable. But I think it is there always on some level. So I guess watching it is another kind of expression of that, and you see it coming out in other people who are expressing that, because we all have to pretend that we never get angry or never have any violent thoughts, but we're all humans, and I think it's very much, it's been there throughout all human history. It's just in recent times and rightfully so, it's become frowned upon. You can't just go around having fights, but we all kind of have that inside of us, I think, to a degree. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's deeper than that. I mean, now there was just someone in the chat who wrote, "The spectacle of violence is as old as time. Of violence is as old as time," and perhaps it is. I wouldn't be able to say whether that was entirely true. I know it goes back really, really far, gladiators and so on. But I'm not so sure. But what I speculate about is that whether it's a kind of, okay, so I liken it like, so if you've ever been on a boat, I remember once I was on a boat, I was steering the boat, and I saw a rogue wave coming towards me, and I had to steer right onto that rogue wave because I could see, because I'd sailed when I was younger, I could see if I hit that wave, and it was coming quite quickly, and it was one of those sneaky ones that sort of all of a sudden was there. If I didn't steer right straight on it, we would capsize. And it was a fjord. We were in the middle of the fjord. These rogue waves happened because of these cruise ships, unfortunately. All of a sudden, several waves come together to one wave, so they can come quite out of nowhere, if you get what I'm talking about. But the point of it is that if I didn't steer straight on it, we would capsize and we would fall over and into 0 degrees water. And my daughter and everyone was there. It would be a disaster. Like, could have been a terrible disaster. I think that's sort of, but I remember that, and I will always remember that moment. And I've thought about other things, other situations. I've been in extreme situations. That right there between life and death, you feel extremely alive, and you're 100% present with what is. Because if you aren't, consequences are dire. It's the same with MMA. You're watching people being completely in the moment. Because if they're not completely in the moment, 100% in the moment, the consequences are extremely dire. And so I think we're sort of by proxy experiencing that in the moment thing. Like, it's not, with meditation, if you're sitting and you're being meditative and you can't be meditative and you lose concentration, the consequence is that you might get slightly irritated or whatever. The consequence of you being not completely in the moment in MMA is that you get to knock the fuck out, maybe killed. You can die. That's the thing. So I think it's that feeling of between life and death, like these grand emotions, these extreme feelings of being alive that we are experiencing by proxy at a very deep and fundamental level when we're watching something like violence. And I think that's why it's so addictive. It's not just the violence; it's what's behind the violence. It's what the violence signifies. So, but anyway, who's your favorite fighter?
You said what I was trying to say, but better. Just more eloquently. Matthias, what do you think?
What I think, it sounds pretty reasonable. What Jonas is saying there. That's probably why I don't care to watch these kinds of things. Had a little too many of those exciting moments when I was younger.
You've had your fill. You fell into the
my fill of between life and death kind of situations. I mean, I was thinking of when you were saying that. I was thinking about it when last time I got chased by a moose. I mean, that was a between life and death situation, right? I mean, and it, you're right. Like you're right there in the moment, and you have to, really be on your toes and calculating and focused, because otherwise it can go horribly wrong, right? And I mean, it's exciting, right, to get like in that space. It's really exciting. You're like, and you feel after, if you come out of that, you feel like you're the fucking king of the world, right? You're like, holy shit, man, I just managed that situation and I'm a badass, right? And so I think your theory is very much on point in so many ways. But it is it is interesting. Like I'm bored by fights on TV, UFC stuff, and that kind of stuff. Like I'm just like, whatever.
It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. But I think there's many ways to experience that. I just, if we had more time, we'd get into it. But I've many times wondered about this idea that is sometimes also, proposed here or purported here, I would say, in this podcast about, you wouldn't want to live back in the Viking age because that was so difficult. But sure, it was difficult, but we can't say whether the quality of life back then was any worse. I mean, what's better, 80 years of comfort or 20 years of extreme, amazing experiences, blah, 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 blah. I would say that 20 years of fucking feeling that if I could just choose between 80 years where I'm just comfortable, but I don't really get to really feel alive, or 20 years of fucking feeling alive, I'd take those 20 years any day.
I think the point that we usually make about that is that, for 90% of the population back then, it would be 20 to 35 years of like shoveling shit.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends. It depends entirely. It depends entirely on where you were and so on. I mean, it's difficult to say. I would say even that I would say is speculative. It depends on where you were. I mean, if you were a serf in a city for a chieftain, perhaps, yeah, probably. But if you're living outside in some remote place in a farm, sure, you had the weather to contend with, you had all these different things, but it's really difficult for us today, with our mindsets today, to really know what it was like and what it really felt like. So we should be careful with such statements. That's all I'm trying to say. And who's to say that it isn't, like, when you have the weather to contend with, when you have these great forces to contend with, you're constantly having to be present and in the moment. Perhaps your quality of life is better. Could be. It is possible, at least. And the idea should be at least entertained.
Oh yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, there's a lot to be said for what does it even mean to talk about quality of life, and
Exactly.
is it really, quality life to be sitting on your couch every evening and watching TV and eating gummy bears or something like that? Like,
Yeah,
I
wouldn't you rather
say so.
shovel shit?
All right. Before we wrap up, I saved this question until last, and Ingrid said, "What has this podcast meant for me, life-wise?" Which I think is a deep question. I'm going to try and keep it short. I mean, honestly, I think, without being sounding dramatic, I think the podcast probably changed my life for the better all around. Because I think it's opened the doors to so many new, interesting people. Met so many new friends from it, like yourself, Jonas. But just solely from a business perspective, I think it's opened so many doors for Horns of Odin to collaborate with such cool people, and really kind of helped out with that. Helped out obviously with people who listen to it find the business. But on just a me level, I think I've learned so much from Mathias, and I think I owe him a lot. And this is probably the nicest I'm ever going to be to him. Because he donates a lot of time to this, and doesn't necessarily get much in return. And he teaches and educates a lot of people, and I've learned so much in terms of this and general lifeness from doing the podcast. Lifeness. It's definitely changed me, I think, for better, and just my outlook and the way I look at things. And I wouldn't change the last 100, and I keep saying 107 episodes, but I think we've done like 110. I wouldn't change it. I really think it's been a fun experience, and I want it to continue for as long as I can convince Mathias to keep doing it.
That was such a good wrap up. That was such a good wrap up.
The sound of my head just like growing larger and larger and larger for every word.
It's true though.
That was a good wrap up, Daniel.
It's true though, because I think we found a storm in a teacup, because we get on so well, but we're also so polarizing in that we're just complete opposites, but we match quite well in this, because this podcast couldn't exist without Mathias, because he's the knowledgeable one. Yeah, I guess you can find any old fool who can sit here and ask questions, but you need
no, I don't think so.
You need someone.
I don't think so. Let me inflate your head a little bit before we wrap this up. No, I really don't think so. I like I said, I really did like the format back then, and I've said sometimes before, this might be sort of slightly ridiculous or whatever, but it does have that quality that the Joe Rogan podcast has, because Joe Rogan is the layman, and he's inviting. Now he's not sitting down with one scholar, obviously, but he's sitting down with all these people who know, many times people who know extremely, who knows such a lot about whatever field they're working in, right? And he's just having conversations from the point of view of a layman. And I think, and as Mathias also was alluding to before, like if it was just two scholars sitting down and talking, it would be ridiculous. So the fact that you have that quality and you have that curiosity that you're talking about inbuilt in you to ask these questions, and to not care whether the question is quote unquote foolish. I mean, the question can never be foolish if it's asked by someone who paid attention, and you do pay attention and you ask the questions, and that does make the conversations that you're having also with your guests and so on go in directions that they probably wouldn't have had it been just a scholar asking the questions. So Daniel, thank you for starting this podcast with Mathias. And before this gets too sort of misty and moisty and chummy, let's wrap this up, shall we?
Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap this one up. We've been going on for about 1.5
It's nearly 2 hours, I think.
Now we're just like descending to circular ass kissing here. So yes.
No, we gotta stop. We gotta stop now.
All right. If you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating, positive review. If you want to check out my company, if you haven't already, it's just Horns of Odin, hornsofodin.com. Same on Instagram. Mathias,
go give us a follow on Patreon. And
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, well, you can of course always find me on Instagram by my name, and you should definitely go and sign up for our Patreon because you'll get some bonus episodes. You'll get Q&As with me. You'll get story time with both me and Daniel and Jonas, and you will have a lot of fun exploring a lot of like random behind the scenes stuff as well that happens on Patreon.
Yeah, if you enjoy,
and it's the lowest tier is only the price of buying either me or Daniel a cup of coffee. Or in some cases, Jonas, I guess.
No, in Norway, you can't get a fucking cup of coffee for $5. Are you mad?
That's right.
Now, if you enjoy hearing us three kind of just hang out, we do one of the bonus episodes is a story time episode where it is pretty much very similar to this episode. Apart from Jonas will read through one of the sagas, and we just shoot the shit, I guess, and talk and discuss the sagas, discuss what they mean, maybe get a little bit off topic and talk about living between trams now, which is one of the topics.
My favorite.
If you want to know,
I live here now. I love.
Want to know more about that, sign up.
Yeah, that was good.
Patreon. But yeah, so there is a bunch of content on there that you get, and it's certainly worth it. Yeah, we love joy. I love making the podcast, and hopefully we can carry it on. Let's get out of here because we need to do the story time episode after this. We'll keep it short this week because the episode's gone so long.